following US sanctions and what it did to the supply chain. So we'll just be very clear and very honest about that. But there's a much broader challenge for us and our international partners, which is diversifying the supply chains and the telecom providers, that we can build up a greater diversification of high trust vendors in this field, and that's what we're focused on.
Christoph.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If we're for human rights, we must be for human rights everywhere. If we're for the rule of law, we need to be for the rule of law everywhere. So, in welcoming today's decisive actions in relation to Hong Kong, can I ask my right honourable friend for assurance that our commitment to pro-democracy campaigners and oppressed minorities across China doesn't end here?
He's absolutely right. I thank him for his intervention on this. And of course, freedom of religion and freedom of expression is not just under threat in Hong Kong or indeed in Xinjiang. It's a broader issue, and we continue to raise it with China and indeed with international partners in the relevant multilateral fora.
Seth Gorton with Afzal Khan. Afzal Khan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hope the Foreign Secretary has noted that almost every member has touched on the persecution of Uyghurs. To me, this is pointing towards a demographic genocide. There is well over 1 million Uyghurs detained in camps who are subjected to some of the most atrocious form of torture. The Chinese government is now taking draconian measures in the aim to curb its Muslim population. So will the Secretary of State agree to meet with the civil society groups who have evidence of human rights abuses in China against the Uyghurs ahead of the next round of designations under the Magnitsky sanctions? And will he raise this with the Secretary of State of Campo tomorrow?
Can I thank the honourable gentleman? And look, he's right to join others in expressing concerns. I made it clear that we regard what's happening in Xinjiang as a gross violation of human rights. I've already referred to the reports from Amnesty and Human Rights Watch and the UN Committee on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination. There was also a report by 11 UN Special Rapporteurs in November 2019 which raised the issue not just of arbitrary detention but enforced disappearance and torture. We will look very carefully at all of that evidence.
Hello, Brian.
I strongly welcome this statement. Mr. Speaker, whether it's the pictures of Uyghur Muslim children who've been separated from their parents, or the horrifying footage of Uyghurs in chains being herded off of trains and into the camps, or the news that the Chinese government is selling the hair of Uyghurs on the internet, many of these things, and I'm sure the Foreign Secretary will feel this very deeply, are reminiscent of the darkest moments of 20th century history. Does my right honourable friend agree with me that as we work across Whitehall to think about all our different points of leverage on the government in Beijing, we must recognise first that they're on a path of increasing aggression externally and increasing repression internally, and secondly, we have to think that some of the things that we do to have the most leverage over them may be also the things in our economic interest, whether that be restricting takeovers of companies in this country or restricting their ability to extract technology from our universities. Does my right honourable friend agree with me that the only way to stand up to a regime that's becoming more and more bullying is to confront them now?
Can I thank my honourable friend? He makes a range of good points, and we will, of course, continue to look at all of them in the round. I share his concern about the harrowing echoes of what we're hearing in some of those reports with what we've seen in the past. Of course, he's right to say we need to use every potential lever that we've got to try and positively moderate or change the behaviour of China. I also think we need to be realistic about the size and the scale of China, and whatever the debate in this House, the likely appetite and disposition, not just of Europeans and North Americans, but the non-aligned countries in the United Nations. We will be at our strongest when we unite people together.
Jim Sherman.
Mr. Speaker, China stands condemned in the World Court of Rights in relation to their abuse against Christians, against Uyghur Muslims. And this week is the 21st anniversary of the persecution of the Falun Gong, whose followers have been subject to commercial organ harvesting with the knowledge of the state of China, backed up with strong World Health Organization evidential base. So will the Secretary of State outline if he will consider sanctions to impose travel bans and its asset freezes against those involved in serious human rights violations in China against the Falun Gong?
Can I thank the honourable gentleman? Of course, as I mentioned before, the challenge will be evidentially not just in terms of establishing the abuses, but the individuals responsible. But we are deeply concerned about the persecution of Christians, Muslims, Buddhists, Falun Gong practitioners and others on the grounds of religion or belief in China, including, I think, with the new national security legislation, the risk that that grip only gets tighter.